I'd got a jar of these kind of Houdion de la Granja butter beans. I was told to get them by nights later because I had one of his cookbooks. It's like, if you're ever in Spain, you must try these, blah, blah, blah.
Yes, love it.
I was hungover and couldn't be bothered to go out and get something to eat. And I was just like, well, this is what I've got.
Yes.
I'll try one. I remember like tasting it and being like, oh my goodness, what the hell? This is not like a bean I've had before. And that was kind of when I decided, oh my gosh, beans can be delicious. But that wasn't enough.
Sure, but that was kind of the initial seed.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting in Gràcia, Barcelona.
Amazing, actually. Wow.
With Amelia Christie Miller. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for being here.
And actually, it's more me coming to you. So Amelia is the founder of Bold Bean Co. She's on a mission to change the world with velvety, big, tender, melt-in-your-mouth beans. She's also an author, full of beans, delicious Beany Recipes to Obsess Over, an instant Sunday Times bestseller, and also Bold Beans, recipes to get your pulses racing. She launched the business in 2021 and is now stocked in all the major retailers. They are B Corp certified and won Grocer's Startup of the Year in 2023. Bold Bean also won a Great Taste Awards, and Amelia got featured on Channel 4 as well as Dragon's Den. So welcome.
Thank you for coming. It's a delight.
Yeah. So I firstly kind of want to backtrack a little bit.
Yeah.
To maybe like the core of this. What made you want to be an entrepreneur in the first place?
Great question. I always wanted to run my own business. It was something that I think I came almost in primary school. I remember like creating these little cards that I would sell, and I always had that to me. But then I realized, I think being a woman and really wanting a career and seeing the kind of challenges of the generations before me, I always felt that being an entrepreneur would give you control and power over your own kind of destiny if you're incorporating motherhood or whatever, or even glass ceilings. Like no one can, kick you out if it's your own ceiling. So I always had that drive in me, I think, from quite a feminist perspective of like the life that I wanted to lead and the trust that I had in the existing system. So I would say that was part of why I always wanted to run my own business.
And so I guess tapping into that then is like autonomy, self-sufficiency, being accountable. Would you say those are all your kind of values?
Definitely. And I would say they kind of then trickle into the values of the business, because we are very encouraging of people having autonomy and kind of being self-sufficient and carrying those through. And I think we've attracted a lot of people who carry those values as well.
Brilliant. And what made you stick at it after the conception of thought? How did you stick it out?
For creating the business?
Yes.
Yeah. I think you need to really dig down into your personal why and why you believe in what you're doing. And from a very personal perspective, I really cared about people loving beans. I actually came to the idea of I want to make people obsessed with beans before I thought this is my business and this is what I'm doing. I was kind of racking my brains for how I would make people bean obsessed. And it genuinely comes from a place of, I believe that if you love food and you enjoy food and you care about the environment and the world, there's no way you cannot be obsessed with beans. And those are my two things that I really, cared about. I'm a massive foodie. I used to be a private chef. I love food. And imagining a world where we can't grow on our soils, that future where we're all drinking Huel is not a version of the world that I want to live in. I want us to be eating real food and enjoying it. And beans are the answer to that.
Yeah, fantastic. Great answer. So kind of going back to the soil, almost sort of like, let's go primal. Let's stop advancing with tech and going the other way. Let's go back to our kind of roots.
Yeah, I've often said, like, it's crazy that we have spent, hours in labs trying to create the perfect fake meat. and, you know, millions of pounds have been invested. I would even say probably billions if you added it all up. And we've got the perfect meat alternative lying there. It's just no one wanted to eat it. And that's what we wanted to change. And I eat meat. And I believe that, you know, I'm trying to reduce meat and I try and eat it, you know, very selectively. But as a result, I don't desire to have a fake version of something that I know will be a lot tastier if I have the real deal. Because food for me has to be uncompromising, whereas beans aren't trying to replicate meat. They're just doing their own thing and they're delicious.
Yeah, I used this analogy yesterday, actually. It's like Heinz and Ottolenghi got together and had a baby. I mean, a long way of looking at it. I mean, that's probably quite degrading. but it is a sort of, when you think about brands merging, it feels like a really premium step in the bean direction. You know what I mean?
Definitely. Yeah. And I think you're right. Like, what we want to do, like, Heinz owns beans with a Z and have so many people who love them and are loyal to them. And we want to bring the kind of those people who think that they don't like beans with an S, do that to beans with an S. But obviously the Ottolenghi angle is that we also really want people to find it absolutely delicious.
Yes. And that comes with the recipes as well, which you are so fantastic at pushing.
Definitely.
I love that you've launched these books.
Yeah, well, actually, before I launched the brand, when I knew I wanted to launch the brand and the business idea, I started on Instagram sharing bean recipes because essentially it's linked to the same mission. If you want to get people eating more beans, yes, give them the best tasting beans, but secondly, they need to know what to do with them. And that's where it, you know, was such a fundamental part of what we're doing, which is inspiring people and tempting them.
And when you're absolutely starving, what do you make with beans? What's your go-to?
It's really hard. I think because we've written cookbooks now and like I'm constantly coming up with recipe ideas, I actually always try and invent something new because you never know when you're going to invent a new recipe. So I would say that that's a hard one. I think binottos as a concept, you know, people are loving the binottos.
Yes.
And that as a concept is always a bit of a go-to. Or miso beans is one of the bankers, where you cook miso with a bit of butter and maybe an onion, cook it down, add a jar of white beans, and then top it with maybe some kimchi, maybe a fried egg, maybe some chili oil. That is just something that's warming and hearty, but you always have the ingredients, and I think that's quite useful.
So background, let's regress a bit. So you were born in Oxford, right? Did you like beans as a kid?
No, I really didn't. I never ate baked beans, and that was a nightmare for my mum. And they just kind of gave me the heebie-jeebies. Don't know why. Still do, actually. And then on top of that, I associated kind of canned beans as like really sad 3-bean salads that were like at a canteen, or my like, you know, someone would bring round for lunch and I would avoid that one. So I really did not like them. And I think that's why my moment when I tried my first ever amazing bean when I was on Erasmus exchange in Madrid, that was so fundamental to me because I hadn't liked beans and I didn't think I was someone who liked beans. And I think that's why it stayed so kind of fired in my memory, and meant that when I was coming to the time where I wanted to launch the business and make people love beans, that's why it was so kind of there. It was etched in because it was such a dramatic change of opinion for the food group.
And then you went to the University of Edinburgh.
Yes.
What did you study there?
History.
History. Okay. So that's very different.
Very different.
Yeah.
But I'm now just beginning. I was studied more. I was really interested in, you know, women's history and social history and, you know, how people have evolved and how families and society have evolved. And I actually now can draw a parallel between that and brand marketing, because essentially it's like why people are the way they are, how they think, the current cultural climate, and how you can kind of change consumer behavior. I think it is somewhere tied together. Like the interest is essentially like analyzing the why and how things happen. And I still love history in that way.
Yes, I guess sort of social anthropology and
exactly.
So you were in Edinburgh studying for 4 years, 3 years?
4 years with 1 year in Spain.
Okay, so a year in Spain.
Yeah.
And was that a transformative year for you when you went to Spain?
I absolutely loved it. Like, it was incredible. I don't think at the time I recognised it as being transformative. I grew up a lot. I had an amazing time. I loved Spain, but, you know, it wasn't like I came back a different person. I was, you know, then just in my final year of uni, you know, just waiting for the next milestone.
Yeah.
Trying to get a first for failing.
Yeah. I know, I remember it well. And then, but you graduated there, left Scotland, and you did an MBA in business.
Did this course called Not an MBA.
Oh, okay.
And it's actually gone bust now, but it was a concept where essentially you could train and like upskill on very specific ideas and sort of, for example, social media management. You do like a little course on that. I did one on product market fit, and I learned a lot there. That was part of kind of, I think, building the confidence to start Bold Bean and understand some of the tools that you need to start a business.
And where was that?
It was at a place called Jolt, Jolt. I think they now do corporate training. It was a startup that,
in London,
you know, and the idea was it was kind of like class pass for your mind, and you would upskill. It didn't work out, I think, in that capacity, but I got a lot from it.
I like that concept though.
It's cool.
Fitness for your brain.
Yeah.
And then you actually transitioned into, so your first job was the bread factory. Am I correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the bread factory is Gail's mother company, and I was essentially selling bread and pastries to cafes and restaurants, and I absolutely loved it. You know, I was like wandering around London, just like kind of with armed full of like bread samples. Like, what a dream. It was so great. And meeting chefs in restaurants, and then the job I had after that, which was the most significant, was a food tech startup called Food Chain, which was also supplying restaurants. Yes. But what it was doing was connecting chefs and restaurants to farmers and growers and producers. It was all about building further transparency in the supply chain, trying to push money back up to the people who actually make the food rather than all of the middlemen. And it was really ambitious in its vision for like a more equitable food system and transforming it, and it was very much in the food sustainability space. So I was learning a lot there about, you know, what food sustainability really means. You know, all of these people use these words like soil health and soil erosion, but back then in particular, lots of people didn't know. Food security, you know, how we can nourish ourselves from the land within the UK, and rather than relying, you know, I think 40% of our food is imported, which is, you know, became obvious during times like COVID.
What was the most horrendous case study you came across while you were working within the food chain?
I think for me, the soil thing really got to me. At the time, they were citing this study that was saying like, we've only got 60 harvests left, which I think has been debunked. It's a bit more nuanced than that since. But the idea is we are running out of healthy soil to use because we're using industrial farming. You know, we've got all of these chemical nitrates being put into the soil, which is actually losing the soil quality. It's where this regenerative agriculture movement has come from, and we've now seen brands like Wild Farmed crop up, or Two Fields Zach Ross, these kind of brands rooted in regenerative agriculture. And part of building a more a nourished soil system is planting legumes. And that's one of the things that I think really got me kind of excited about the potential of beans and why people were more excited by them.
So just going back to that, so 60 harvests, is that?
So that has been,
they've now
debunked it,
that.
But say for example it's 100, say it's 100, you know,
be a famine.
There's nuance, but like essentially we are rapidly eroding our soil quality on the planet globally.
And where do your beans come from?
So it depends which variety, and it also depends which year, because some years, you know, for example, let's take the chickpea. Some years we sourced our queen chickpea from Spain because they had a better harvest, sometimes from Mexico. So we kind of vary based on the harvest each year, because obviously harvest is a natural thing and sometimes it's bad. Our butter beans come from Poland. So depending on what we do is we kind of look to where that variety grows best and source from there.
So you flex and bend depending on what's kind of in season in those countries. So sometimes you'll be pulling it from Mexico, sometimes. Are those supply chains, so they're not concrete then? You can kind of like...
Yeah, I think, well, actually most of the time they are from the same origin because they tend to have the best, but chickpeas as an example is grown all over the world. Like we could source from a lot of different countries, but we've chosen kind of like Spain and Mexico because of the quality, whereas the butter beans, we've only ever sourced them from Poland. We know that variety also grows in China, but we've only ever sourced them from Poland. So there's
multi-origin.
Exactly. But we do have a British bean as well, which is our Carlin P, which I'm obsessed with. I love it, and determined to make other people even know about it. It's on Ocado, determined to get it into all national supermarkets at some point.
Let's do it. Okay, so regressing again. So we've got this like kind of the bean story. I want to tap into that ideation process. So the kind of psychology when you were in Spain. You say it started with a hangover. Is that true?
So I would say that really that moment, as I said, was the moment that was like kind of etched on my brain of a transformation of my bean perception. It was not when I came up for the idea of bulb bean. I then moved to the UK. I started working for the bakery and then food chain, the food tech startup. And it was at food chain where I started, you know, on one hand, learning about food system issues and how beans would literally fix them all. And then on the other hand, I was working with, you know, really cool restaurants in London. And I was noticing in their move towards more plant-based cooking or climate-friendly cooking, they weren't using Beyond Burgers and that kind of food, Impossible Meat. They were celebrating natural, beautiful ingredients and beans and pulses because they're filling, they're full of protein and fibre, so they give you that satiation, which is classically not associated with vegetarian cooking. And that was, you know, as someone who, you know, I used to be a private cook and I love cooking, I was very inspired by these chefs. And that was how I started to cook. And that was when I realised, hold on, beans are literally the answer to to everything. People just need to love them like I do.
So then you started kind of in COVID with the actual business plan.
Yeah.
What did that look like?
It was funny. Like I remember the start of that year, my New Year's resolution was I was going to write a business plan. And, you know, I was still working at the food tech startup. And then I was, you know, that obviously that startup was supplying restaurants. So it was really badly affected by COVID. And before you knew it, you know, I was on furlough and kind of, you know, I'd actually moved back with my parents because I was convinced the company was going to go bust. Luckily, furlough was introduced. So I had this kind of golden opportunity to really like rapidly accelerate. I wasn't just writing the business plan, I was starting to work on the business. And that I think was a gift because you know, it's a big jump setting up your own business. And I'd kind of, because I'd set out, I'll write the business plan, and I had this idea. I had the idea probably the November just before. I was like, you know what, I really need to do this. I'd be back, like almost your pride is on the line. Like I've got this opportunity, and I think I could have, you know, talked myself out of it for ages. And God, it's so sad to think that could have happened. But
but you didn't. You
I didn't.
To your gut.
Exactly.
And in those sort of first, let's say January, February, March, I'm kind of tapping into. You mentioned November there. So that year, those first sort of 6 months, what was your mindset in that creative process?
I was very anxious.
Yeah.
It was before Ed, my co-founder, joined, and I was sharing it with no one but a group of random strangers on Instagram. And a lot of people, you know, when I would ask them about it or I'd speak to people, they'd be like, beans? Like, really? You know, it's so hard to imagine now.
Reaction kind of gets a bit.
And it's hard to imagine now because beans are having a moment. But at the time, it was definitely hard. It was definitely really hard. But I think as soon as, you know, I launched the brand, you know, a year later, and as soon as I started to have people taste the beans and experience that moment that I had, that was when I was like, every single message that just gave me support slowly built up my confidence until the point where actually it probably took years to over time build confidence in the idea and the proposition. You kind of think people are being nice for a really long time.
Sure.
But you know, over time, all those little messages from strangers who tasted my beans just did make a difference.
Love that. And if I was to start a business tomorrow, let's say a bean business, what should I prioritise? Like, give me 5 steps.
I think prioritize your personal why and why you're going to get up each morning and be determined to do this, because that grit is what is going to see you through challenges. I'd also prioritize seeing every mistake or failure as a learning, and like kind of that has really helped. I think my mindset, I've never seen failure as oh we're awful, what's this. I've seen it as we had to learn that at some point and we just learned it now, and that's the outlook that I think you've got to retain. I also think it's about surrounding yourself with people that you can learn from. And what's amazing about FMCG and food and drink industry is that people are very collaborative. They really want to help each other, because so infrequently are you really competing with, with founders or other businesses. And even when you are, I've had some great chats with the MD of Merchant Gourmet who've directly gone into competing with us, and he's so great and I learned so much from him, so I'm not going to stop. It's a really collaborative industry, and I think that is really special, and the sooner you start doing that, the sooner you learn. And then I'd say,
maybe from a more kind of business point of view, financial point of view, what would be your advice?
I would say fundraise soon. Like I would have fundraised sooner. I spent so long like agonizing over £100 being spent, and that sounds, obviously you still really care when you have angel investors, and but one thing I found really hard was I'd agonized, got it to a point where it had 70k revenue, and had put so much into it, had been consulting on the side, had moved back with my parents and dog sat and done all these things. And then I met someone who was fundraising at the same valuation, yet hadn't actually done any of that yet. And I was like, what? But I felt like I couldn't, ask for any more. And so I always say, like, fundraise sooner, because actually angels have an opportunity to invest in someone who is going to give themselves to this business. And actually, with all these EIS benefits as well, they know it's a risk, but actually you don't need to be in loads of pain just to get something off the ground. And I wish I'd valued myself and my time a bit sooner, because I found that time. And also then people can join you, As soon as I fundraised, I was able to bring on, people to join me on my journey. And that was completely life-changing for sure.
You kind of bat ideas around, and you've got
and you go through everything together rather than by yourself.
And what was that time span between having a jar of bulb beans in front of you, finding a manufacturer, and then positioning that in front of investors? What was the time span?
So the idea was from idea to fundraising, it was about 2 years. But from launch of product to fundraising, it was about 8 months.
So tapping in now to, I guess, how did you make beans sexy? Something you use a lot, actually, and the language you use when you're describing your beans as sexy, and I think that's so true, is that we're now in this generation of Gen Z who are very health conscious and very aware of the benefits of plant-based eating. And I certainly, a lot of my diet is maybe 60% plant-based a lot of the time, although I really love a bit of ham on iberico when I'm in Barcelona. So how did you make beans sexy?
Well, obviously the quality of the beans, regardless of your business, your product has to be spectacular, and that is what we have. We have the best beans in the business. So that is obviously a fundamental part of that. But I think a fundamental part of telling that story and getting people excited about trying it comes through everything from packaging. If you look at the canned food aisle, glass jars weren't seen. You couldn't, because no one was proud of the products below. It was a commodity, whereas we kind of introduced a jar which is, visibly different, visibly proud of the contents of what we are selling. I think that was a really important part of the journey.
And I'm also just thinking about like the war, and you kind of associate tinned goods with
wartime
completely.
And I'd actually had a fixation on that category from a uni student. I was always kind of curious about like how the canned food aisle hadn't been more excited. And I only really reflected on that one, you know, after launching the business. But I remember saving kind of ideas for, you know, canned soup idea or something like that. So I think there was a real opportunity. You've got to remember that your billboard, your most important billboard, is your packaging and in store, where if it's going to jump out. And I think that was a big part of it. I also think one of the communities that I give the most credit to is food writers and chefs. So my background was working with chefs, and the first people I ever sent beans to were those who I believe are changing our food culture. They are the ones that are inspiring food trends, and they are food chefs and writers. I think it all trickles from them. You know, it starts with Ottolenghi doing a recipe with za'atar, and now it's in every supermarket. And I gave them to this community first. And I think because, like me, they really care about food, but they also want to produce recipes that are better for the climate. Beans are the best food because they're delicious, but also help you kind of work towards a more sustainable future. They also had that same excitement and wonder at the food product. And I think if you can convince, it's almost like a lot of other businesses. I know that, I think it was Sip Smith started with kind of sending it to the top 50 restaurants. It's like, you know, go to the tastemakers and they will do.
They'll get passionate about it too.
And they
spread the
will,
word for you.
They'll make it sexy for you.
Yeah. Okay. So kind of advertising through, I guess, experiential, right? You're tapping into something quite experiential there. So getting it to your consumers through chefs and and I guess that was social media focused as well.
Well, I say kind of, but I'm very much talking about food writers.
Yes,
I sent it to the chefs at the restaurant, but we do supply restaurants now. But at the time, I wanted to create a brand that was going to change how people ate. And I didn't see restaurants as the answer to that at the time. Now I think we're doing that, and that's really exciting, you know, and we're working with the likes of like Farmer J and Salad Projects and Attis and these sorts of places where people can try the beans for the first time.
Actually getting it in the literature, getting it in the press, getting it in PR.
So it's creator, send it to creators, and it's essentially influencer marketing. But I see that as like a really key part of, you know, because I could have gone after a different group of consumers, creators. I could have gone after people who were fixated on health, people who are fixated on protein, people who, you know, really wanted to, or even the vegan community but I chose people who just are who want delicious food, who create delicious recipes, the tastemakers in food. And I think that was, you know, I think I could have created a good brand targeting more of a health angle, but I went instead for
like proper
pleasure.
Yeah. And how early on was that kind of reach out?
It, you know, I'd love to think like, oh yeah, it was really strategic and I was thinking about it. But like, I was just so embedded in that world from my passions, my interests and my previous role that it was just like who I knew.
Okay, great.
and
good network.
And who I was already following, you know, who I was naturally curious in. I'd be like, can I send you my beans? So I kind of started with myself as like, you know, consumer zero, and it went on from there.
Brilliant. So yeah, tapping into Instagram for a moment. You used Instagram to build trust and constant feedback from your audience. How did you find speaking to camera?
Oh God. Okay. So at first, this is why I actually made it on a close friends group, and I added anyone that I didn't know to the close friends group. Okay. So if I saw a random person from school who annoyingly found it, obviously they were not going in because I was too embarrassed. It was so cringe. And the first few times, you know, I would do kind of like, I do 3 shots and make sure I look pretty and like all of that. And it was, and then over time you just give less shit. And now, you know, I've definitely had some bad angles. I've had greasy hair. I've like done it all, but I realised that actually I care less. I mean, I also, you know, I'm married now. My husband doesn't follow my, you know, who cares? But I think that, but initially it was, and I had some people, I remember one person being like, oh, it's a bit cringy. And I was like, well, I'm feeling so cringe about doing this. But I think that what it did is it was the cheapest way to build a connection with my audience.
Exactly. It's free.
It's free.
It's free advertising.
It's free.
Yes.
And and haven't a lot of people since then proven how valuable it can be.
Indeed. Was that just a small little Instagram account to begin with? And then you gradually built it up over time?
Yeah.
And that was your brand?
And Hannah was our first hire, who is an amazing content creator and recipe writer. And, you know, as soon as she joined, you know, immediately we just like ramped up the content. The content got so much better. She's really talented at that. And now it's been an incredible pillar to our business since.
And do you encourage all brands to do this, that method?
No.
Okay.
Reason being is that like we are an ingredient and we are trying to make people bean obsessed. You can do our recipes and you don't need to buy our beans. But suddenly if you, obviously we hope you do.
Yeah.
But suddenly, say for example, you make a very specific type of sauce, which is lemongrass and lime and coconut marinade. That's not going to be interesting to someone who doesn't buy that exact product. So I think it's a lot harder to really replicate that kind of recipe content idea to do it. I do think content is a great way of reaching an audience, but I think you've got to, if you're going down it, maybe you can do more of a, you know, employee generated content angle. There's so many different ways you can kind of go after social media, but the recipe content in particular doesn't work for every brand. How
did you combat that self-critical lens when you were starting out? And you kind of tapped on it there, but just go into that a little bit, push a bit further. Was it just, I'm going to drop my ego and completely be kind of obsessed and just drive? What can you talk a bit more about that?
I mean, I very much I built up confidence with this small community of people who were following me and not trolling me yet. And over time you have to be shameless to be, you know, a founder, and you have to put yourself out there, because if you're not going to do it, someone else will, and they'll get there. And I think as soon as you believe, okay, do you know what, what I found really helpful is saying, I'm doing this for the mission, I'm doing this for the business, and suddenly you're not as self-aware about whether it's cringe or not. You're like, well, I'm doing it for this reason, so even if it doesn't work, who cares? Like, people know that I'm hustling, and actually people do respect and passion.
Yeah, absolutely,
exactly.
So kind of, let's tap into like sustainability. Your beans are super relevant right now because they're natural nitrogen fixers, they're greenhouse gas reducers, and they pack a punch of health benefits. Let's unpack that a little bit. Nitrogen fixers.
Yes. Okay. So when you are growing a crop in the soil, you have to have nitrogen in the soil because that's like essentially the food for the crop that you're growing. And, you know, 100 years ago, chemical fertilizers were invented, and suddenly we were pouring liquid nitrogen over the soil, and we still are. They're huge. You know, it's an amazing way to grow a yield really quickly. But what that has done over time is it's eroded the quality of the soil because they haven't got kind of biodiversity, it hasn't got its own ecosystem. It's just a sort of like, I'd say a sort of Ozempic
artificial way.
Artificial way, exactly.
Yeah.
And beans are natural nitrate fixers. So instead of putting a liquid nitrogen chemical fertilizer on the soil, if you plant a bean crop, they take nitrogen from the air and put it in the soil. They fix it in their nodules, in their root nodules. And actually they were kind of, if you look at kind of Mexico as an example, often beans are still used in kind of crop rotations to help naturally fertilize the soil. And beans were used in that way prior to, you know, the farming revolution, which kind of introduced chemical fertilizers.
And then greenhouse gas reducers.
Yeah, so I think this depends on where, you know, your diet and if you are getting your beans from if you're getting your protein source from beans more than you are meat, obviously that is going to dramatically impact how your personal carbon footprint.
Yes.
And our view is if we can make people enjoy beans beans. And maybe even just start with, they start with by having beans with some meat, but then over time they realize, oh, maybe I'll just use a tiny bit of chorizo in that dish, and actually it's predominantly beans. Maybe over time they start really enjoying a fully vegetarian or vegan dish without knowing it, because they've just fallen in love with beans. And that's our kind of our way of encouraging people to have, enjoy eating a more plant-based diet, which naturally has a reduced carbon impact.
So kind of conversion.
Exactly. Manipulation, maybe.
Yes. And they pack a punch of health benefits. Can you break that down for me? What benefits would I get from eating beans on the regular?
Yes. So beans, obviously full of protein, which is, really everyone knows about protein. I don't need to tell you about that. But I think the real hidden superpower is fiber, which is really on the tip of people's tongues at the moment, because it's fundamental in gut health and, fueling your gut microbiome with amazing fiber, which is going to help all of the bacteria kind of flourish there. So that is one of the reasons why people are really championing beans now. Fiber is linked to so many health benefits, but also your gut is now linked to, a better mental health, so many different things. And what we recognize is that actually a lot of consumers who are using the Zoe app, which is all about kind of nudging people towards healthier guts, were really getting scored highly for using beans. And that was the first time we started to see this like influx of people from a health perspective. That was a few years ago. But now we have, Hugh Fearnley-Whitting still has just released a recipe book on fiber. Dr. Emily Leeming is releasing one in a few months, and they're all kind of championing beans as a huge part of their recipe catalogue. And that is, really exciting, because if people feel great and are nourishing their bodies through eating our beans, that's
they're going to keep buying it.
Big win.
Awesome. Okay, thank you for explaining that so clearly. What was your distinct method when building Bold Bean Co? Did you have a blueprint?
I love it. I wish that I could say I had a really distinct method and I nailed it. I mean, a lot of the time, it comes through naivety, gut instinct, but I think the biggest method that myself and I'd say Ed, my co-founder as well, have, that I see as our superpower, is that we have always been really curious about what other people have done and what other people do and have learned from them, but also known where we feel personally strongly tied into our values, that we want to kind of like stick our kind of rod in the sand, whatever the thing is. But I think learning from others and being curious to learn has been a really key part of that.
Okay. And when did you meet Ed, your co-founder?
We worked together at Food Chain.
Okay.
So I kind of, from day dot, I was trying to get him on board, and he was a bit like, not really sure about this, no thanks. And I then kind of, gave him some beans, and he was still like, not sure. And then over time, I gradually chipped away at him and finally brought him on, because, I mean, he's brilliant and he has a complementary skill set, but we share the same values personally as well. And I think that was, it's been a game-changing having a co-founder on the journey.
So what is his skill set and what is yours, and how do you...
So at our previous company, I was sales and marketing. He was kind of ops, but he has now obviously ops and finance. He's brilliant at. And then we kind of share a passion for kind of people and culture as well.
And what stage of the business did he come on board? How many years were you into it?
I'd been working on it for about maybe 18 months, but it was about 8 months after launch. So it was around the same time as the investment round.
And your first launch was into just like delis and independents, basically? Yeah. Started with that?
Yeah.
And it was just you to begin
just
with?
Me, yeah.
Tapping on doors,
DMing on Instagram. Hey, I've just started this bean business. Would you consider...
Would you consider trying it?
Would you consider trying it? Or taking it on? Yeah, exactly. A lot of that.
And then actually, let's give like out of home a moment for a second, because I think I saw a post you did recently on LinkedIn, and you were saying the benefit of out of home. And actually, it's easy to forget about out of home, because we really kind of really praise Sainsbury's and Tesco and Waitrose, whatever. An argument to say that out of home, restaurants, cafes, is just as important as being in a big supermarket.
I would say it is for different purposes. So without the supermarkets, we wouldn't have a business.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's the reality. The margins are so tight in the other channels. However, I think to really change food culture, you need to be in the places where people are having conversation. I don't think people have conversations in the supermarkets. No. They're just doing their thing.
Yeah.
Whereas in a little deli, you might speak to the owner and be like, oh, I loved that cheese you gave me last week. And they're like, yes, amazing. Oh, have you tried these new beans? I did a recipe online. They're people who love food. And then in a restaurant, you're eating, you're sharing food, and you're going, God, this is delicious. I didn't know beans could be this good. So I think conversations happen in these spaces, and that is what we want to get into.
Okay. So they kind of serve very different purposes. One's just like strictly commercial, really. Yeah. And the other one does the kind of PR piece. And in terms of like distribution, you've got into the Netherlands recently.
Yes.
But also UK and Ireland, and also cheeky Morrison's in Gibraltar, I saw.
Oh my God. I mean, I didn't really even know that. That's great.
I was looking at your map. I think there is.
Love it.
Morrison's in Gibraltar. So distribution, I want to talk about the key to unlocking markets in Europe.
Well,
what's your key?
We are 2 months into the Netherlands, so that is what we're talking about here. And I would love to say we know, but I think we're still so early that we probably don't yet know. What we have done is found a brilliant partner called Brand Plant, and they're Dutch. They understand the markets. They understand, you know, everything from how the retailers work to who to work with. You know, we've got a partner to help us with, you know, understanding the kind of from a PR perspective, what the landscape is there. And then we've also gone there. We've invested time there. My brother lives in the Netherlands, which does help. So that has given me a bit of an insight as well. But I would say, come back to me on that in 6 months' time, and let's see if I can give wisdom, because right now we're sort of winging it and learning as we go.
Okay, that's very honest of you. And so with Ireland and UK, can you maybe give an anecdote of sitting down with a buyer at a top retailer that really didn't shake you or had a kind of monumental impact on you?
We had one time where I was told by people, never give away exclusivity for free. You always need to turn it into a negotiation. It always needs to be, you know, okay, we'll give you exclusivity on this product or this product line, whatever, but we want secondary space. We want free ads in your paper. We want whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And so I went in saying, well, yes, we would like it, but what can you give us? And I remember the buyer's face just turning. And honestly, I've never been so scared in my life. And she was suddenly like, what we're giving you is a listing. And I was like, okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And I literally laughed like, I mean, it's just, they're brilliant negotiators, buyers. And I probably could have, if I had way more confidence, I probably would have been like, I've actually got supermarkets lining up to stock this, blah, 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 blah. But I didn't have those supermarkets lining up to stock it. I didn't have that confidence. So negotiation is just confidence, really. And I didn't have that. So instead, I was just terrified. And I said, absolutely, and gave them absolutely nothing for the exclusivity.
Okay. I see. Okay. And was that Waitrose? Was one of your...
Waitrose was one of the ones we've given exclusive. We've done exclusives with others as well.
Cool. Amazing. Buyers are tricky. Yeah, you gotta, I mean, there's nothing better than pitching a deck and then you get it, and that's a fantastic feeling. When did you start getting a little bit of, because obviously Planet Organic, Boots, Whole Foods, when did you start feeling, okay, I think we've got something here? When did it really start moving?
I would say after Dragon's Den.
Yeah.
And it's hard to know whether, you know, putting ourselves on the BBC transformed things, or whether the momentum behind beans from a health perspective, from a, you know, trending on Instagram recipe perspective, you know, we'd launched our cookbook by then, like all of these things kind of started to happen. But that was about 2 years ago, and that was when I started to really notice the difference, and we had retailers coming to us for what, because data was also then, because supermarkets will buy data and they can see that we're bringing in new shoppers, we're bringing in way more cash margin to the category, and they're like, we want a bit of that. So that was what, you know, a retailer coming to you just like in those first few years was just completely unheard of.
Phenomenal.
So that was a big game changer for us.
So yeah, let's talk about Dragon's Den. Deborah Meaden. Terrifying. Funnily enough, my mum travelled around Australia with Deborah Meaden.
Wow, I love that.
When she was like 20. I think she was a lot more, well, I don't know, probably different back then. But she invested in your brand when it had just got into Waitrose. The company secured 50k investment from Deborah in exchange for 7.5% equity, which initially placed the company's valuation at over 650,000. But this was obviously before your rapid revenue growth in 2025 when you hit 7.5. How did you find that whole experience?
I mean, going on Dragon's Den is an amazing experience. It's terrifying, obviously, that's the whole point. But going on an amazing TV show and seeing the producers and the runners and the performance of the whole thing is just really awesome. Like, we all watch TV. We've all watched TV shows. I think, like, go on it for the experience. Obviously, I got trolled afterwards and people were kind of saying, you know, no thanks, we don't want this. What, you know, commenting on, like, you know, my voice and everything. But, like, that happens. And if you know that's going to happen and you're not going to, if you can get over that, it's just an amazing experience.
And you went in there, I'd say, pretty formidable already. You had Waitrose behind you.
Maybe for you, if you're a hardcore foodie, you'd have heard of us. But most people hadn't heard of us.
Okay.
You know, we've still only got, I think, 9% brand awareness in the UK, which is not much. There's a lot of people who don't know about Bold Bean. So that's the kind of reality. So we wanted to get more people aware of who we were and what we were doing.
And then Deborah, is she still remaining as a investor now in the company?
So actually, we can't. You legally you can't disclose. I can tell you off camera. You can't disclose whether they did or didn't invest.
Oh wow!
But I think 60% of deals don't go through for various different
I've heard this, and it also doesn't come in for a very long time. So you get the yes, but it might be like a 6-month wait.
Exactly, and by that point, you might have a very different, you know, set of distribution, set of revenue numbers, set of valuations, so you can renegotiate as well.
Interesting. Okay. So you used it as a vehicle to get publicity, would you say?
Yeah, I think that by the time, I mean, to be frank, I say to other founders as well, like, you know, you going on for investors, these investors are very time poor. They have hundreds of investments, and there's brilliant people in FMCG who are investors who don't go on TV and don't have the number of investments. So if you're going on for purely financial reasons, I think it has to be a combination of wanting investment at that moment in time, but then also wanting to get your brand out there and have publicity off the back of having this incredible opportunity.
Sure. Okay, let's talk about your recent listings with Asda and Co-op. That's exciting.
Yeah, well, I mean, we have been, particularly with Co-op, I was really trying to get in there for, you know, the amount of calls I've had with the Co-op. And then my amazing team, you know, since about, you know, I think maybe it was 18 months now, we hired Lucy Cowan, who's our commercial director. She came from Bold Foods and she's completely incredible and has built a wonderful team around her. And you know, as soon as you have someone brilliant, you just trust them and you let them get on with the job. And, you know, in terms of commercial, for these listings, I have had nothing to do with them. I can't take credit for them at all. Yeah. And what's incredible is that I'm on maternity leave right now, and this has all just been happening whilst I've been off. That's and they are just very good at what they do. And I think they've also really built, you know, we've got Beth, our beanologist, who looks at the storytelling of data and how we can convince them, because people want to stock our product because they know it's delicious. They think we're a fun brand, but they're rational brains. So their hearts are like, yes, but it's business. They need to think rationally, and data and showing that we can make them money really helps tell convert that part of the sale. And I think that's something that we've introduced in the last few years.
And that is actually one thing in the food space that there's tons of, is data, isn't it?
Yes.
And you can buy a shit ton of data and it can tell you a lot.
And it can be very expensive.
Yeah, I've heard. Okay, so let's talk about the range. You started out with your initial beans, the butter bean, am I correct?
Butter bean, chickpea, and then I had our organic products as well, which is our organic chickpea and organic white bean.
Okay, yeah. And what's your favourite bean?
At the moment, it is the Carlin pea. I'll see if I've got one.
Yes.
It's grown by a guy called James Bucher, who lives in the Suffolk-Norfolk border. And we partner with Hodman Dodds, who I love as a business, and they were a big inspiration behind me starting Bold Bean to begin with. I used to sell them to restaurants. And it's really nutty and it's got a kind of rough texture, but it means, you know, if you were to make a salad with this, all of the dressing kind of gets in all the crevices, so it's really kind of juicy and delicious. And they crisp up really well, and I just can't believe that people don't know about them. So yeah, I'm determined to make them the next big thing. They're my favourite at the moment.
Awesome, love that. Carlin beans, Carlin peas, apologies. So with your range, is there sort of, they're all called queens?
Yes,
and is that because they are large and juicy and queen-like?
So we kind of have a definition that we've kind of created. What I really wanted to convey from a kind of brand and marketing perspective is like, these are not conventional beans. These taste so much better. And so now we kind of define that by, they're always from the most recent harvest.
Yeah.
We're always testing how the bean cooks and like how each origin cooks and selecting the best, like expertly sourced. But then it's also our method of cooking. So queen is defined to our method, which is, you know, we soak them for a very long time. We discard that soaking liquor. We then cook them, scald them and cook them long and slow until they taste perfect, which sounds really simple. But that is not the case for a lot of industrially produced tins, because they, who can blame them? It's a commodity product. You've got Aldi price match. Let's just get it as cheap as possible. So let's cook it until it's food safe. Might not taste the most delicious. Probably need another 20 minutes, but that costs money. Why would they add money if they're going to be compared against Aldi price match? So actually that cook is a really big, important part of the kind of queen definition.
Okay, interesting. And then where do you do all this factory work?
In Spain.
Okay,
yeah, that's why I'm here. So we work with producers in La Navarra and La Rioja and that kind of area as well.
And for non-bean users, people who are a bit sceptical about beans, what would be your kind of biggest piece of advice for them?
I would expect that they're sceptical because one of the things is, I'm going to have loads of farts.
Okay, yeah.
That's one of the things you get pushback. Yeah. And actually, if you introduce beans slowly, you don't get that.
Yeah.
And also our beans, because we discard that soaking liquor, it doesn't have the oligosaccharides, which is the kind of causes the gas.
Right.
So you can have far reduced farting from our beans. So I would say start small and try our beans, give our beans a go. And then to someone who said that they just don't like the flavour or taste of them, I would just tell them to eat one straight from the jar.
Okay. Love it. Okay, thank you. How do you distinguish each one?
Well, it's based on the variety and kind of, it's a meeting of the variety and also the consumer perception of the variety. Because, for example, our butter bean, the actual variety name is Piękny Jaś, which means handsome Johnny in Polish.
Okay.
But it's part of the butterbean family, and the kind of translation is butterbean. And if we were to call it Piękny Jaś, then people would be like, what on earth is that? Yeah. So we use the translated version of some of the varieties as well.
What led to the decision to move out to Barcelona?
A combination of, obviously being close to the beans and having that as a way to make sure that the quality of the product is consistently good. But then also I love Spain, I've lived here before, and I was getting really burnt out in London. I found London life really challenging, particularly as a founder, because as a founder, you care about your business and you want it to do well. And if you get invited to go to an event, if you say no, are you unambitious? Do you not want this to succeed? So I was saying yes to everything.
Yeah.
But I also had all of my friends in London. I also had my parents just outside London, and I was being pulled in all these different directions, and I felt like I was just failing miserably at everything in life. And I realised when Ed and I had come out of here, Ed's my co-founder, and we'd done 3 months, and the energy and the creativity I had from being away from the kind of the rat race, which I felt, really put things in perspective. And that combined with the kind of the business needs of moving closer to the producers, and that it just made so much sense to me. So that happened about a year and a bit ago. And it's also given me the ability to see that maybe I could have a family. And you probably can't hear this, but Olive might have woken up.
Yes.
Olive is real, and she's here.
Yeah.
Hopefully she's going to go back to sleep.
How do you find that divide? You know, you strike me as someone who likes control, and you're kind of a micromanager.
No, absolutely not.
Oh no, okay.
No, I mean, Nakira, would you say?
no, very relaxed.
Really? Can you micromanage me a bit?
Oh, really? Okay.
As I said, like,
So
I value autonomy,
liberal.
and we trust people to get on with their jobs and believe in them, and we believe in their ideas, and we're a remote first team. We do have a hub in London. We have a lot of people who live near London, but we are remote first, and that is something which I am very proud of, because we've still managed to create a really brilliant, thriving culture despite being remote.
Yeah.
But it also means we've got the most incredible talent, because some people, like, you know, who particularly, you know, our Spanish team, we've got one in Valencia, one in Madrid. Clara is where? Where's Clara? Asturias. In Asturias. I always say the wrong one. And that is, you know, they are so talented. We can, you know, but we wouldn't be able to have them if we were living in London, because they don't want to move to London. So I think it's given us the best talent. And it forces us to be a culture where we trust our team, because we can't micromanage them. We're not there to micromanage them. We've got to just trust them. And that is, having trust as a default and a non-negotiable, I think, is a real strength in a company culture.
Absolutely. Okay. And then what would you say is your biggest flaw as a person?
Biggest flaw? I would say I am messy and disorganized. And I think that how that also translates into my work is that, you know, I'm one of those people who am switching tabs. I'm not good at concentrating. I'm kind of all over the place. And that is a challenge for me and the people around me.
That's so refreshing to hear, that confession, though. And you can make it work.
Well, continue to endeavour to.
Brilliant. So you sort of got like 10 things firing at once. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
So it's then kind of honing in on the one.
Yeah, trying to tell yourself to focus.
And do you think, I've noticed a lot of entrepreneurs, my dad included, ADHD is kind of runs in the family line. Do you think there is something between that, like sort of being able to kind of juggle lots of things and being an entrepreneur?
It's a great question. I think that if you're an entrepreneur, you have to be able to jump into different departments, different business problems, and different, you know, people problems, everything. And if you are really fixated on one skill set, one mode of thinking, then it's really hard to grow, because as a business grows, different functions develop, different problems occur that you'll never have known before. So being able to get yourself into finance head, and then get yourself into creative head, and then get yourself into, okay, how do we manage the people problem over here? You know, they're completely different skills. So I think you have to be flexible in order to survive.
And when shit hits the fan, how do you cope in crisis?
Have a bath.
Okay.
Have a bath. But I also I think I am an optimist.
Yes.
And I always try and see silver linings and see ways that we can turn this into a positive. Because I think that if you are someone who's cynical or over fixating on the negative, startups are not for you, because it's really things are going to happen, and if you have
Yeah.
a positive outlook, then you can get through them, and also bring your team with you and make your team feel not daunted by it, because they'll
Yes.
look at you and be like, if you're stressed and you're freaking out,
How
I
the
will.
hell am I gonna?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. What is the most dishonest thing you've ever done?
Dishonest. Oh wow, that's such a good question. Dishonest. I feel like this will be like a content thing or something. It'll be something like,
We can move into the silence. It's okay.
let me think
Lots
about
of time.
this. I'm trying to think of one which will be like entertaining. I think that with
Yes, online.
Seeing the book for the first time.
oh yeah, that's a great one. So when I
I think I know the video actually.
yeah.
I've seen
Oh
it.
my god, this was really hard because we had to do this announcement video for the
Yes.
book arriving, and I think at the time we didn't have the book. They couldn't send it to Spain, but we needed to get it done. We needed to get the video, and if you look, like any good piece of content, you look online, see what other people have done. And I had to do this video of like me seeing the book for the first time, and hilariously, I think it's this one here. So this is it, and it's Philippines, our new cookbook, but inside it's actually our old cookbook. So I had to be like, oh wow, so amazing. And I found that like we had to do quite a few takes.
Okay. Gosh, so that's just you just got like hard copy
Just
as
have
the
the
frame.
cover.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the cover.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. The more you know. Well, very good acting. I completely believed it. So.
Nice.
Okay. And how do you rebuild yourself when you're exhausted? I think founders constantly are battling with that because you're just pushing and then you will burn out. How do you combat that? What do you do?
I don't work late. I have to have my evenings, and that has been something that I've never been able to. I physically cannot do it. Obviously the odd time I will work later. I mean, it's very hard now with baby, but I will work later, but I don't make it a regular feature of my life. And I think having that boundary and sticking to it is really important. I have an app which blocks things like Slack on my phone for certain times of day. These are kind of coping mechanisms. It's blocked social media as well. So I can kind of get out of my head and
away
just
from a
allow away from a screen, exactly.
Yeah,
and yoga. I find yoga is just brilliant for the mind and soul and obviously body as well.
God, totally. I'm exactly the same actually. I love dance, and it's something that
incredible.
always roots me. Is like, I kind of always go to a street dance class or a hip hop class.
That's so
and
great.
I feel instantly Phoebe. It's
Yes.
like a connection.
That's amazing.
Probably because I've been doing it since I was 7 years old.
Love that.
So what's your guilty pleasure, would you say?
At the moment, my guilty pleasure is Substack, probably.
Okay.
I kind of feel like it's actually scrolling and it's actually social media, but I like try and kid myself that it's like more educational and I'm learning something, and it's like my newspaper, because I don't really like reading the news. It's just depressing.
Yes.
I'm not very well informed on that department, but
No, I've come across Substack because I know Delicious, she writes on there quite
She's
a bit.
got a
It's
great
become
one.
a thing. It's like a writer's blog for founders, isn't it?
yeah.
And do you write one yourself?
No, I don't. I've written like one article. I just know that it would be a real commitment right now with the baby and the business. I think that maybe one day. I had a guy, I've kind of eroded this from my CV memory because I only lasted there a month and a half. It was a really challenging workplace. I was very not in a good place when I worked there. It was really tough, and there was substance abuse, and it was just very bad environment, and I quit. Obviously. And I remember the guy, the founder, just saying to me, startups aren't for you, Amelia. Yeah, you need to go and work at like a corporate. And obviously, instead of that being kind of, oh my God, he's right, I was like, you are so terrible. I'm going to prove you wrong. Yes. So it turned into like fire. So I think you can turn sometimes the worst feedback into like fuel in your belly and fire in your belly.
Just out of interest, was that in F&B? That stuff?
It was, yeah. Yeah.
But you can't say what it was.
I can't say. No.
God, what an absolute arsehole.
He was. He was.
Yeah, because it clearly is for you. Okay, what are your biggest strengths, Amelia?
Strengths. I would say strengths are storytelling, I think, and reading vibes. I think that can be a weakness as well.
Okay, so you're quite intuitive.
I feel like I can often read vibes to my, not necessarily can be a good thing. I think a lot of my team, there's a high IQ at Bold Bean. And a lot of people are very kind of aware of that, which I think makes a very like kind and compassionate environment as well.
Yeah, what's your advice to sort of bringing brand to life? Not creating a dead brand. How do you create an alive brand?
I think people, personally. I feel like people are what people want to connect with now. And you'll notice if you follow the Bold Bean Co. Instagram, like a lot of my team will be pairing up on stories. There's an amazing story the other day of Charlie, who kind of does our out of home, you know. She accidentally just got on the wrong train. She was supposed to go to Cambridge and instead she was going to York, and she was like, oh my goodness. And then she just shared, she's like, guys, does anyone know any delis in York that I can go to? And they ended up making the day about York, which I just thought was so brilliant. But you can see the team, because people don't connect with a soulless brand that could be run by a private. They connect with people who are really passionate. So I think that's a big differentiator.
Who do you look up to?
Who do I look up to? I mean, there are so many amazing women. I'm part of By Women Built. I mean, Ella Mills, you know, Pippa Murray from Pippa Nut. A lot of these people ahead, Cass from Propercorn, these businesses that I learn from, and I think also particularly like women as well. You know, I also want to see, you know, mothers who have been doing it. All of those are mothers, and that's kind of what I'm kind of confronted with at the moment, that challenge of navigating motherhood whilst being a founder, and seeing people who've done it before and speaking to them has been really useful.
Nice community. For people who don't know what By Women Built is, can you kind of break it down?
Yes, so it's a campaign to try and encourage people to, if you can't invest in female founded businesses, which, you know, 2% investment goes to female founded businesses, the idea is you can buy from them, and that is something that everyone can make that decision. And given that most grocery shopping is done by women anyway, disproportionately so, actually women buying from women can really make a difference. And I think it's not just stopping at supporting female founders and building the next generation of role models so little girls can grow up and be like, I can be a founder, because that's really important representation.